Welcome to Your Brain On by Salience Learning. I'm Karen Foster.
And I'm Krista Gerhard. This is part 2 of our 3-part series with Dr. Barbara Oakley. Enjoy.
A lot of us don't have awareness of what works from a learning perspective, right? You mentioned many people reread information, and many learning curriculum are designed with, in the professional world, a day's sessions of training or 2 days of training, bulk, very heavy, not spaced, very little breaks for those opportunities for the brain to pause and come back. And so I think when I took the Learning How to Learn course, what was so empowering and applicable from a salient standpoint was all the little techniques that are mentioned and how we try to design our curriculums and our experiences to allow for that elaborative practice, right? So ideas are connected and you're building what you said is the neural net, right, of ideas, and using metaphors to take advantage of established neural nets and basically tack new concepts onto them so they become stickier.
Yes.
So some of those concepts in your Learning How to Learn course are not only what at Salience we try to embody in our instructional approaches, but teach others about, so that we can continue to almost teach a person how to fish from an analogy standpoint rather than continuing to give them a fish. And especially for the learners in our population who are inundated with explosion of scientific information, changing business models, so much information to change, right? Without the skills and techniques you mentioned to learn more efficiently and effectively, they become just overwhelmed, right? And don't have that appropriate skills to digest a 2 or 3 pages worth of scientific rich information efficiently and effectively. In your experience, have you seen a gradual change in an openness to brain-based learning? I'd love to hear how you've seen the receptivity as your mock has been so well viewed and so forth. What's been your thoughts on that?
Well, it's interesting because the reception of our first initial, the Learning How to Learn course has been so overwhelming, and it's continued year after year. It's just, if anything, it seems to grow. And so the reception has always been there amongst the general population. In educational settings, as in higher academia, it's been a harder row to hoe. And I think part of that is if people are, their entire careers are dedicated to a certain approach, it's really, really tough for them to say, no, a lot of my past work is really misguided and wrong. It's easier to just kind of close your eyes and keep sailing blithely forward. There are some major universities that still, like their teaching colleges have like virtually nothing to do with neuroscience. I think it will be a wonderful thing as I've seen a couple colleges begin to add things. But as that becomes, more common to incorporate neuroscience into education, that will be a real blessing because in the long run, all teachers should know something about how the brain works because there's so much there to help guide and inform your teaching. For example, differences in working memory capacity. There's you're going to have people in one classroom that have like between 3 and 10 slots of working memory. They can have lesser or greater working memory capacity. How do you teach all of these students at once? There's ways to do it. But if you're aware of the working memory capacity, that can be almost more helpful than any other factor, in informing your teaching. But I do have to allude to something you brought up about boot camps or intense learning experiences. I mean, those can be good, but actually, I think that's an indicator of the importance of online learning. because you can only get an instructor and a group of people together if they happen to be in a local area. And much of what we do in many businesses today is, it's very distributed. So this is where, I think a lot of companies have this experience where they feel that they have to do boot camps because they've always done it. People like them because even if they're really tedious during the day, you get to party. You can go, you have these wonderful boot camps in Brazil or whatever. So it's like it's a nice thing. It's a gift that they give them, but they're actually much less efficient at actually providing the knowledge that people need and providing it in a way that sticks. So there was one of my favorite athletes of all time is Julius Yago, and Julius always wanted to learn to throw the javelin, but he was from Kenya. He wasn't wealthy. He couldn't afford to get a coach or go overseas. There were no javelin throwing coaches in Kenya, so he just started watching YouTube and going out and practicing. And 99% of the time, just by doing that, he became the world champion in throwing the javelin. So, this is really a lesson for all of us. I mean, first thing you would say, oh, well, you can't learn a sport online. And then, of course, once you learn that somebody can become world class at learning a sport online, you go, oh, well, yeah, but that's just a sport. You can't learn anything mental. It's just so funny. But you can learn both mental activities and physical activities incredibly well online because it facilitates that spaced repetition, interleaving and all sorts of things. So, online learning, I think, for businesses is it's cost effective, it does a better job, and what more could you ask for?
I think it's a really interesting point with regards to the shift that we've seen in the marketplace, specifically with regards to life sciences and how COVID-19 really accelerated people's change in view of these things. Because to your point, these boot camp sessions, these live meetings where everybody came together, it was, for culture, it's for team building. And yes, it is for training as well. And it allows them to carve out a time where they come together and they focus truly on learning. But to your point, where the real learning comes is when you get to apply it, right? Day in and day out on the job. So this concept of incorporating blended learning with some sort of digital component along with the live component has really resonated. And especially in this environment, people are craving a bit more so than ever to be live with their teams. But it's also allowing them to appreciate how they can leverage their digital learning opportunities to set up that live learning experience so that when they do come together, it is for application. It allows them to move forward in some component when they're on the job, trying to demonstrate these skills. So, I think it's important for everybody to just take a moment and appreciate how hard this all is. I was actually surprised when you said that universities are not really incorporating, these techniques and cognitive science into the way that they're teaching or acknowledging it. And we thought it was really just in the corporate world. It wasn't sort of pervasive. And I think what you do and how you can help adults individually say it's okay to not have all the answers, but to figure out a way that makes sense and give them the tools and strategies that they can use on their day-to-day jobs to be able to be more proficient. Karen mentioned a lot about with regards to the advancements in life sciences, the advancements in technology that they're all facing, the way their worlds are changing because of the shifts in the marketplace in their organizations. So how, as a learner, can they become more efficient and successful in their roles through the process of learning how to learn? I'd be curious a little bit more with regards to your course itself and some of the techniques that they may be able to walk away from with that ability to apply within their roles as it relates to the learning how to learn course.
So it surprised me. So I was giving a speech for one major company, And they, um, I said, we were going over the materials, and I have material on the Pomodoro technique. And I said, everybody knows this. Let's throw this out, because we had a very limited time. And they're like, what's the Pomodoro technique? And I thought, oh my word, this was amazing. And these were learning specialists. So it's surprising. I think that people who are um, there are always people in companies who are like the scouts. They go out and they scavenge and they're looking for interesting new learning things. And they're the ones who are taking MOOCs, reading interesting and relevant books. Um, and these scouts will they almost always know about the Pomodoro technique. But those who are, have different approaches to things, for example, they may be much more centered on their job and getting their job, doing it right, and focus like a pencil sharp beam on that. They often don't know these kinds of techniques. And the Pomodoro technique, anyway, growing from learning how to learn, I have learned that people just absolutely, that is their number one. They love this technique. And I mean, I get emails, every day practically saying, oh, I took your learning how to learn. Oh, and by the way, this Pomodoro technique is just so fantastic. I finished my doctoral dissertation. I was flunking from engineering school, and I'm on the dean's list, all this kind of thing. So what is the Pomodoro technique? So simple. That you don't hear about it because it's pretty tough to market and make money off of. But, it was invented by who I think is a absolutely brilliant, man, Francesco Cirillo in the 1980s to do a Pomodoro in its essence, and he's written much more about it. But all you need to do is put away all disruptions, so like no pop-ups on your computer or your cell phone. I mean, good luck if you've got a 2-year-old. So I will grant you that. But do your best to try to get distraction out of the picture, and then set a timer for 25 minutes and focus as intently as you can for those 25 minutes. Then, when you're done, for about 5 minutes, take a mental break. This does not mean go to your cell phone and check your text messages, because you'll be like, yeah, look, oh, wait, no, I got this. And then next thing you know, you're focusing on responding to the text message. So by break, I mean something like, oh, have a cup of tea, walk around a little bit, maybe listen to some music, something that relaxes. And what this does, if you'll remember, this is kind of like focus mode, diffuse mode. You're giving your diffuse mode a little bit of a chance, to work in the background on the materials. And if you're focusing while you're trying to take that break, you will overwrite some of the material you just learned. So you make your learning harder. And taking breaks at about that time frame, and no one has really studied it super carefully, but we do know that after about 15 minutes or so, the hippocampus seems to get a little bit full. Or, and it's actually, the hippocampus is more like a little indexing mechanism. But what it's doing is, for example, when I'm speaking here about something, your hippocampus is like, its little neurons make connections. Their dendritic spines are just like, they will sprout out so fast. That hippocampus is just like so quick and glib, and it just can remember stuff. It's really that way. And your neocortex is listening at the same time, but the neocortex is kind of going, huh? What'd you say? It's got super weak connections of that learning. So when you have that little 5-minute break, what's happening is no input. Your hippocampus can, in essence, turn from working memory to instead face the long term memory in neocortex. And what it's doing is it's kind of going, Hey, hey, look, neocortex, remember this is what you're supposed to be linking up solidly, and it will be reminding and building those neural connections during that break. If you don't take breaks, your hippocampus doesn't have a chance to do that. But this also is a little bit of an indication why cramming can seem to be effective, because your hippocampus it really can kind of absorb a lot of stuff. So if you're cramming it all in, but if it doesn't have a chance to turn around and offload into long-term memory, you won't retain it. So that's that situation where a student will cram last minute for a test, appear to do well, but then 2 weeks later, they've completely forgotten the material.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Your Brain On. Please subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. I'm Krista Gerhard.
And I'm Karen Foster.
And we'll see you next time.